when I was 18 or 19, I would leave my apartment late at night. My roommate would let me borrow his huge book of CDs, and I'd wander the streets, just listening to music I'd never heard before. Sometimes I'd walk to the store just for a destination, and other times I'd walk to my parents' place. The walks were really lonely and romantic, and I'd pretty much go for a walk every night. This story takes place maybe 16 years ago. I used to never spend time online, so I went to my parents and randomly got online one night. Unsure of what to look for, I typed in nature tattoo and I found Nick Baxter's website. I was so moved by his artwork, I emailed him. He was in Connecticut and I was in Texas. I didn't have any money at the time. That was something too. So it kind of worked out. But he was essentially like, just find somebody cool in your area. I'm sure there's awesome artists out there. And I was like, all right, whatever. So I just look at so I got obsessed with his website. I'd go on there and I'd look around, and it was the tattoos of the leaves. I was just obsessed. I was like, I have to get a tattoo of leaves from Nick. So fast forward, maybe like 2 or 3 years. I was 21. I just came back to Dallas. I'd kind of run off to Philadelphia for a little bit. And I came back and I was at Whole Foods, and there was this chick that worked at Whole Foods. I'd never seen her before. And she had this fucking insane Star of David tattoo on her arm. And I was like, oh my God, that is it. I have to go right now and get a tattoo. So I got in my car and I drove down to downtown, and I just walked around looking for an artist to do a Star of David tattoo on me. So I just found somebody, some random guy, and I was like, so he printed out a Star of David and was like, hey, what do you think of this? And I was like, bigger. I kept being like, no, I want it bigger. Like, I wanted it as glorious, even a fraction as glorious as hers. I wanted a badass, glorious Star of David tattoo. So I get the Star of David on my chest, and then I go back to Whole Foods maybe like a week later or something, and I see the same chick. Oh my God, dude. It's unfucking real. I swear to God, her tattoo is tiny. Like, I blew it up in my mind. Like, I was so fucking deluded. I was like, what the fuck is wrong with me? So then I have a Star of David tattooed on me. So fast forward another year. I'm working at this restaurant and I see this woman with all these tattoos, epic fucking tattoos. And I was like, dude, who did your art? Oh my God. And she was like, oh, it's this guy, Mark Merchant. And she wrote down his number and was like, here you go. He's your man. So long story short, I got my first session done of a sleeve, and then I got distracted in life. It was supposed to be a full sleeve, but I just got a single outline of a koi, and it stayed on my arm in the end for like 6 years. I loved it. I mean, what can I say? But at this point, so I get the Mark Merchant tattoo, and at this point, it's been 4 or 5 years since I first found Nick Baxter's website. I would go on it once or twice a year, every year, to fill my head with his magic. At this time, I found CrimeThink through his website and read all their propaganda, their books and their pamphlets and shit. I heard of train hopping from CrimeThink's website. At this time, I'd met this guy, and we were hanging out a bunch, like sleeping on rooftops together and shit. And I showed him the CrimeThink pamphlet that's like, do you want to travel for free? And it was talking about like train hopping. So me and him decided to hit the rails for a month. On the last day of our trip, homeboy disclosed his undying love for me, which, that's never happened before. So I just jumped into that relationship, and it was it was straight toxic death. It was fucking awful. Every day I wanted to fucking die. So this relationship, like after 2.5 years of being together, he pretty much destroyed our relationship and ran off to Portland. Alone, I needed a life shift. So I joined the raw food community. I become a raw food fanatic, right? And I joined this new age cult, and for the first time, I'm living alone, and I started acting really strange. I was creating these really extreme rules for myself, like for my mind, of like how to act. I would just spend all this time alone in silence, and I would barely move, and I didn't want any outside stimulus. Like I didn't want to read or hear music, like no movies, nothing. Like I wanted to like embrace the emptiness of my mind, right? But in the end, it just made me want to fucking die. I was having a very rough time, and I didn't know what to do. So the waves of darkness were pretty much eating me alive, to be fucking dramatic about it. So I was spending all this time alone, and it just clicked, like, oh yeah, I need to check out Nick's website, you know? At this point, it'd been 8 years of consistently looking at his website. And in the midst of all the dark that was my fucking mind and my life, it was like the sun bursting through the clouds. His website said he had moved to Texas. I was like, oh my God. It was like a light switch had flipped in me. In my hippie mind, I took this as a sign that the things I thought mattered, you know, and that I mattered. So I emailed Nick requesting, like, hey, I'd love a full sleeve from you. And his website said, so I just like sent that email and was like praying for a reply. And his website said he has like a 6-month waiting list, and I'll turn down work if it doesn't sound interesting. So after 8 years of waiting for Nick Baxter Tattoo, he emailed me back and we scheduled a first session. It was really like a light switch. Shortly after meeting Nick, I met Mark, my husband, and the night after I first hung out with Mark, he was like, we're soulmates. And then like 3 months later, we got married. Like he asked me to marry him. It was seriously like a light had turned on. All the darkness just fucking had nowhere, you know? It was just gone. It took me 2 years to get my sleeve completed, because sleeves are not cheap, and I had a really complicated life at that like job situation. That's a long story. So I meet Mark, and then I get my throat tattooed, and then I get my chest tattooed by Nick also, and our wedding rings. So I have all this Nick Baxter artwork. Okay. So one day I'm at work, and there's this guy, Wayne, who would always come into the restaurant I worked at. He was like really passionate about helping homeless people. Like he'd like be on the ground, like pulling homeless people out of gutters, giving them hope and resources. And Wayne would always come into the restaurant. And one day he was like, hey, tell me the story of this incomplete tattoo. Cause I had the koi fish for like the last 6 years, just like sitting on my arm. And he's like, you know, when I meet homeless people and they have incomplete tattoos, I really think that means something. Like that's a statement. And something about him saying that really struck me, and I was like committed. I was like, oh, I need to finish. I need to resolve this. I need to finish this tattoo by Mark. Happened at this exact time, believe it or not. Mark Merchant moves back to Texas from New York City, and he stops in at the cafe. And I was like, dude, I'm so glad you're back. Like, can we finish my sleeve? And it took, I think, I don't know, like a month or two of him finishing the outline on my sleeve. before I kind of dropped the ball again. So he does the outline, and then me and Mark, we run away to the tiny house on land. And then after a year of living in the woods with no plumbing, that shit got old. And then we sold the tiny house on land and moved back to Texas, okay? We're back in Texas. I'm back maybe like a year or so. And I'm like, fuck. I really, really, really need to finish my sleeve. Like, it's a statement of character or something, being so fucking lazy about this shit or distracted or whatever. So I go to like connect with Mark, and Mark is gone. Like, I don't know where he is at this point. And Drew Bias is like a homie. He's like, all of our friends like know him. He did this sick ass fucking tattoo on my friend's thigh, and he knows everybody in the unschooling community, and he was just like a friend of friends, right? And I was like, dude, can you fill in my sleeve? Can you fill in my outline? And he was like, oh yeah, Mark, I'm actually taking all of Mark's clients. I was like, you're fucking kidding me. This is amazing. So so I was like poor as fuck at the time. I don't know how I scraped by the money, but I got all the money, and within a short amount of time, we knocked out all the fill-in, like, of the tattoo. And then I was like, hey, can you tattoo my hand? And then he put a badass mask on my hand. And then I had completed this 7-year Mark Merchant tattoo. And I wanted my fingers done, like maybe, I don't know, so many months after Drew did my hand, did that mask. And I asked Drew and I asked Nick, and everyone's like, dude, you need Thomas Hooper. And I was like, okay. So I call up Thomas Hooper, like I call up Rock of Ages, and I was like, hey, I want to schedule with Thomas Hooper. And they were like, oh, you have to come in person to do this, to set up this appointment. So I was like, fuck. So we drive down to Austin. We drive like 3 hours so I can like stand there for 2 seconds and be like, hey, can I get a session or not? So we drive down there, and I'm waiting to get booked. And then Thomas Hooper stands up and he walks up, and I'm like, so I stand up and I look at him. Dude, this is so silly. The level of eye contact, like the quality of eye contact that Thomas Hooper gave me was like a 10 on a 10. Like out of anyone you've ever met, like top one. He's number one in eye contact. It was like quality fucking eye contact. It was like, okay, so I was like, oh my God, I'm so fucking lucky. This guy's gonna tattoo my fingers. So a couple months went by before the session was available. So we drove back down to Austin, and he tattooed my fingers. Okay, so one time I had this group of ladies when I was waiting tables. This older group of women. It was like 4 women, and they said they looked at my tattoos and they said, "What did your mother say when you got all this done?" Do you remember what you said?
I think I would say something like, well, are you sure, you might get tired of it someday, and then what are you going to do? And
No, you didn't say any of that. If you did, I don't remember.
what did I say?
You didn't think. And this is what I told them, because this is what I remember.
Okay.
You said something like, "Nah, I love you no matter what." And they died laughing. They thought it was like a joke. They thought it was hilarious. And I was like,
Obviously, they don't know me.
they don't know me. Okay. Peace.